Hi guys, in this lesson we'll be taking a look at the fundamentals of Python functions. So this is very important to grasp so that you understand Django as well, because Django has lots of functions, lots of classes that have lots of weird looking stuff, hashtags in front of your arguments and double hashtags. So we'll take a look at that, and so that you guys can have a better understanding of what all that means. So before we get started, let's take a look at what a function is in Python. So a function basically is it has a name and it accepts values. So these values can be objects, can be strings, can be any arbitrary data type that you want to pass to this function. So what we have here is just a simple function that accepts two strings. So it's got two arguments and it will print out the contents of this. So let's go ahead and fire up our program here. So we'll execute Python followed by args.py. So since our code is inside args.py, so let's run that, and it prints out the two arguments which are passed, which we're calling through this function call here. So this is a basic function. So let's move on and let's comment this out, move on to the next function and see what that's all about. So this type of function that we have here, if you notice, it accepts two values again, but this time the values have an assignment. So this is called a keyword argument, Kwargs. So you'll notice this quite a lot within Python functions, KWR. So whenever you see this, always remember it means keyword argument. So this keyword argument here accepts two values, but it has two default values which are preset. So if you notice here, we call this function, but we don't pass anything in. So if we fire up our code, let's see what actually happens. It prints out two default values here. So since we didn't pass anything, so let's go ahead and just pass in some random integer here, and let's fire up our code. So you notice it prints 202. So we can go ahead and actually override the second parameter here, and it should print out 200 and 600. So that works fine. So this is the keyword arguments. They allow you to set default values and they allow you to call the function without any arguments. So let's go ahead and comment this out and move on to the next type of function in Python. So this particular function here accepts what we call variable length arguments. So these are arguments which are arbitrary. They are not predefined, but they grow based on the more arguments you actually pass in. So what's the point of having these variable length arguments? So these allow you to handle arguments that are not defined, of course, and serve as a preventative measure to prevent programs from crashing. So that is if you have a program with variable length arguments here, these args with a hashtag in front, you can actually not pass in a lot of values, or you can pass in more values, and that won't affect your program crashing. So let's go ahead and fire this up print statement here, which will call our args function here that has this hashtag in front of it. So let's go ahead and see what happens. Let's just clear this and fire up our program. So you notice it actually prints out the contents of cat, dog, fish, mouse, and ABC. So how we are printing out the contents, we just write in the for loop here, and what we're doing, this hashtag actually accepts a dictionary of elements that we have here. So it's like a list of elements, and it will unpack it. So whenever you see this hashtag here, it unpack this contents out, and then we'll be able to iterate over them and print out the contents. So here we're just printing out the index value. Since we have unpacked it, we're using this enumerate function here, which will allow us to have an index and the actual value. So let's move on to the next function. So the next function that we have here is called keyword arguments, but this time the keyword arguments have a double asterisk. So this is a variable length keyword argument. So what is a keyword argument? A keyword argument allows us to specify the key and the actual value here. So we're saying the variable is called dog, and dog has a value of pet. Same thing like the rest, fish, orange, and apple. So what we're doing here is we just iterate through the items, the dictionary items that we have here, and we'll just print out the contents. So let's go ahead and fire up our program, and you'll notice it actually prints out the keyword arguments. So the hash trick allows us to unpack our values. These values will get packed up. So it's like a zipping and unzipping process that's happening. So let's move on to the next function. So let's comment this out and uncomment this function here. So this function here accepts, you can use the variable length arguments, the first args and the second keyword arguments together. What we'll do here is we'll print both out, but before I actually print them out, I need to uncomment this piece of code at the bottom here, which will allow us to pass the normal arguments, the variable arguments here, and the keyword arguments, as you can see here. So it's very important that you always place your args first, then followed by your keyword arguments. Otherwise, Python will complain it will not compile. So let us go ahead and actually uncomment, because we need to leverage on print args here, and print args is right here. So let's uncomment this function here. And we also need this function, so I'll go ahead and uncomment this one right here. And I think those are the two that we need, this one and this one. So let's go ahead and fire up our program and see what actually happens. So you notice that we actually have an error here. It says that print k w args, keyword args, takes exactly 0 arguments, but 1 has been given. Why are we getting that error? So the problem happens here. Whenever we have the asterisk here, the unpacking process happens. So what we want to do is we want to unpack our args here, and we also want to put another double asterisk sign here so that we can actually pass it over to this function here and that function here, so the whole process can actually resume back again. So let's go ahead and fire up our program this time. So let's clear and run it. So you'll notice that it actually prints out the args and the keyword args. So this is how you can actually pass your variable length arguments around. You need to ensure that you put a asterisk in front. If it's a keyword argument, you put a double asterisk in front. So this is a pretty cool thing to do in Python. You know, you can keep appending, you know, keyword arguments, and you can keep appending, you know, the normal args here, variable length args, and your function can be very customizable. You know, it can keep, you know, growing dynamically, and it won't really break anything since you're just appending. So let's move on to the last function here. So I'll just go ahead and comment the print statement so we don't clutter up our screen. So let me comment this, and that should be fine. So let's go ahead and uncomment the last function here. All right. So what does this function actually do? So if you notice, this function just accepts 3 arguments. It's a normal function. It's not a variable length function. It's just a normal function which has 3 arguments, and it will just print out the contents of the 3 arguments that we have here. But notice that we have a list of random things, and this list of random things, we're actually passing it to this function here. So how does that happen? Well, in order to do that, you can leverage back on the asterisk again. So when you put an asterisk in front of the list of things here, what will happen is Python will then be able to unpack this and assign it to the correct argument within your function here. So let's go ahead and run this program and see what the output looks like. So let's clear that and let's fire it up. So you notice it actually unpacks our list of items here by using this asterisk here, and it will assign it to each of the arguments that we have here. So this is the cool thing about basically using the asterisk and double asterisk in Python, the variable length arguments. So you guys should play around with this. Definitely encourage you to keep practicing on variable length arguments, because it's a pretty powerful thing. Later when you're digging into Django code, then you understand, okay, that I have this function here, it's got args and it's got keyword args. I understand how that works and how the values get unpacked or get packed and passed around to other functions which are being inherited. So this is a very important concept you guys should grasp and keep studying on it. Hope you guys enjoyed this lesson. See you in the next one.